Ida for turning my back on my husband's affair children after his death, despite their pleas for support? It's funny how life changes in an instant. One moment, you think you know the person you're sharing your life with, the person you've built a future around. The next, you're standing in the ruins of what used to be. For me, that moment came 3 years ago when I discovered my husband had been unfaithful. I still remember the night I found out, how the ground felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. But even that pain pales in comparison to what happened next. Tom and I had been married for 10 years. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was solid. We didn't have children by choice. That decision had come after many long, thoughtful conversations. Tom said he wasn't ready, and I agreed. Teaching filled the space where children might have been. My days were spent with classrooms full of kids, and by the time I came home, I was content to sit quietly with Tom and unwind. I was happy. Or at least I thought I was. But then came the revelation, the affair. The children. I still don't know what tipped him over the edge, what made him seek out someone else. Sarah worked with him. She was younger, vibrant in a way I hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't just that he had been with her. It was that they had 2 children together, Luke and Emma, both under the age of 6. I found out in the worst way possible, of course. Not from Tom directly, but from an email, an accidentally forwarded thread between him and Sarah, discussing how they would break the news to me. I still remember the moment I opened that email, thinking it was just some mundane message about bills or groceries. But the words, "We need to tell her soon. I can't keep this a secret anymore." I confronted him that same night. He cried, begged for my forgiveness. He claimed it was over, that Sarah had meant nothing to him. It had been a mistake, he said, one that spiraled out of control. But the children. I couldn't just pretend they didn't exist. I couldn't ignore that tangible evidence of his betrayal. The walls closed in on me, and all I wanted was to escape the suffocating reality of it all. We separated, not divorced. I wasn't sure why I didn't push for divorce right away. Maybe a part of me hoped for some kind of reconciliation, though deep down, I knew things would never be the same. Tom moved out, and I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the pain with busy schedules and lesson plans. A few months later, I saw them for the first time, Luke and Emma. It was at Tom's insistence, a family gathering he had arranged as some sort of peace offering. He had brought them along, hoping to bridge the gap, to show me that we could all exist in some kind of harmony. I tried to be polite, to smile, but inside I was breaking. They were sweet children, beautiful even, but every glance at their little faces felt like a punch to the gut. They looked so much like him. After that, I avoided any interaction with them. Tom respected my boundaries, though he continued to be a part of their lives, balancing his time between them and our separation. As months passed, I found a new rhythm. It wasn't happiness, but it was survivable. Then, 2 years ago, tragedy struck. I was at home, grading papers late one evening when I got the call. It was from a hospital. My heart stopped, and I gripped the phone, barely hearing the words the nurse spoke. Tom and Sarah had been in a car accident. A semi-truck had lost control on a rainy highway. They were killed on impact. The nurse asked if I could come in to confirm the identification, as I was still listed as Tom's emergency contact. I drove to the hospital in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I couldn't process it. One moment, I was filled with this gnawing resentment toward Tom, and the next, I was standing in a sterile hospital room, staring at his lifeless body. It didn't feel real. After the funeral, I tried to retreat back into my life. But the world had other plans. A week after the service, I was approached by Sarah's sister, Claire. She sat across from me at a local cafe, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder of documents. "Jane," she began, her voice soft and tentative. I don't know how to ask this, but I need your help." I blinked at her, trying to hold it together. The past week had been a blur of grief, anger, and confusion. The last thing I wanted was to rehash Tom's betrayal or discuss anything related to Sarah. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. Claire hesitated, biting her lip before she spoke. "I've been named as Luke and Emma's temporary guardian in Sarah's will, but..." She paused, her voice faltering. "I can't take them in permanently. I just don't have the resources. The truth is, I think they should be with you." The words hit me like a freight train. With me? I repeated, incredulous. Claire, those children are not mine. They're. I know, she interrupted, her eyes pleading. I know they aren't yours biologically. But they're Tom's, and they need someone. Someone who can take care of them, love them.
Claire, I started, but she reached across the table and grabbed my hand, her grip desperate.
Please, Jane. I wouldn't be asking if there was anyone else. You don't have to give me an answer now. Just think about it, okay? I pulled my hand away, my head spinning. How could she ask this of me? How could anyone expect me to take on the children that had come from the affair that destroyed my marriage? I couldn't look at them without seeing everything I had lost. But Claire didn't back down. Over the next few days, she called me multiple times, gently trying to convince me that taking in Luke and Emma was the right thing to do. The guilt weighed on me more heavily with each passing day. What kind of person would I be if I left them with no one? But the resentment burned just as fiercely. They weren't my responsibility. One evening, Claire came by my house with the children. I hadn't agreed to anything, but there they were, standing on my front porch, holding hands. Luke, who was 5, had tears in his eyes. Emma, barely 4, clutched a worn stuffed bear. My heart ached for them, these innocent children who had lost both parents, who had no idea why the world had turned upside down. But I couldn't do it. Not then. I wasn't strong enough. I sent them away. I spent the next few nights plagued by nightmares. I dreamed of Tom, of his face as he told me about the affair. I dreamed of Sarah, laughing with him in the office, the life they'd had behind my back. I woke up in a cold sweat, guilt and anger wrestling inside me. I couldn't escape it. Weeks passed, and I tried to push it all out of my mind. Claire had taken the children back, but I knew the situation wasn't stable. They needed a permanent home, and I was still the best option in her eyes. Yet the thought of raising them, of being their mother, it was suffocating. One day, I visited Claire's house, telling myself I was just checking in. When I arrived, the children were playing in the backyard, oblivious to the weight of the decision looming over their lives. Luke was chasing Emma around, laughing for the first time in weeks, it seemed. When they saw me, they ran over, their faces lighting up with innocent joy. "Auntie Jane," Emma cried, her small arms reaching up for a hug. I froze. Auntie? It was a term they must have picked up from Claire, but it felt wrong. I wasn't their aunt. I wasn't anything to them. Yet as I looked down at Emma's wide, hopeful eyes, I felt a tug of something. Not love, but the possibility of it. Could I? Could I actually take them in and be the mother they needed? That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the adoption papers Claire had sent me. My heart was a battlefield. On one side was guilt for not being able to step up, guilt for wanting to refuse. On the other was resentment. How could I possibly raise children who were the result of my husband's betrayal? What kind of life would that be, for me or for them? In the end, I made my decision. I called Claire the next morning and told her I couldn't do it. I wasn't the right person to raise Luke and Emma. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the fact that I wasn't ready to be a mother. I never had been, and certainly not in these circumstances. Claire cried, but she understood. She assured me that she would make other arrangements, that the children would be cared for. I knew she was disappointed, but there was no malice in her voice. She just wanted what was best for them. As the weeks turned into months, I tried to move on with my life. I focused on work, on rebuilding myself from the wreckage of my marriage. But the guilt never truly left. I still saw Luke and Emma sometimes, though not often. Claire had found a relative in another state who could take them in, and they were settling into a new life. A few months after my decision, I received a letter from Claire. It was brief, just a note to let me know that Luke and Emma had moved in with their great-aunt in a small town up north. The relative, a woman named Margaret, was apparently thrilled to have them, and Claire assured me they were adjusting well. I felt a mix of emotions as I read the letter. Relief, mostly, that they were being taken care of, but also a deep, lingering sadness, an acknowledgement that I had truly severed my connection to them. Life began to settle into something resembling normalcy again. I buried myself in my work, spent time with friends, and did my best to forget about the past. But forgetting, I quickly learned, isn't the same as healing. One afternoon, almost a year after Luke and Emma had been placed with Margaret, I received another unexpected visitor. It was Claire, standing on my front porch, looking more tired and worn than the last time I'd seen her. She was holding an envelope in her hands, her knuckles white from gripping it so tightly. "Claire," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "Is everything okay?" She gave me a weak smile as she walked inside, but her eyes told a different story. She sat down at my kitchen table, and I followed, unease gnawing at me. "They're doing well, you know," she began, placing the envelope on the table between us. "Luke and Emma. Margaret is wonderful with them. They're happy there." I nodded, not sure where this was going but feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "But," Claire continued, her voice soft, "they still ask about you." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "About me?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "They ask about their Auntie Jane. Luke especially. He remembers you from that first meeting, and he's been asking why you don't visit." I swallowed hard, guilt once again rising like bile in my throat. I had told myself that by letting them go, I was doing the right thing, for them and for myself. But the idea that they were still thinking of me, still wondering why I wasn't part of their lives, made my chest tighten with something I couldn't quite name. I didn't think they'd remember me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire reached across the table and placed the envelope in front of me. "I didn't come here to pressure you, Jane. I came because I wanted you to know that the door isn't closed. You don't have to be their mother, but if you want to be in their lives, there's room for that." I stared at the envelope, my mind racing. Inside were pictures, Claire explained. Letters the children had drawn, scribbled in crayons, with little notes written by Margaret about their progress. My hands trembled as I opened it, pulling out the first photograph. It was of Luke and Emma, standing in front of what I assumed was Margaret's house. They were both smiling, holding hands, looking so much older than the last time I had seen them. Luke's smile was wide, missing 2 front teeth, and Emma's curls were tied back with a bright pink ribbon. They looked happy, and yet there was something in Luke's eyes, a quiet sadness, as though he were waiting for something. Or someone. "They're good kids, Jane," Claire said softly. "They've been through a lot, but they're strong. And they're not asking for much. Just to know you're still there, that you care about them." I ran my fingers over the photo, tracing their faces. My mind flashed back to the last time I had seen them, standing on my porch, holding hands and looking up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. I had shut them out, turned my back on them, because I couldn't deal with my own pain. And yet here they were, still asking about me, still hoping I might one day be part of their lives. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. "I don't know if I can," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Claire reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one step at a time. They don't need you to be perfect, Jane. They just need to know you care." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The weight of everything, the past, the affair, the children, pressed down on me, and I wasn't sure if I could carry it. But as I looked at the picture of Luke and Emma, something shifted. I had spent so long trying to close myself off from them, to protect myself from the pain of Tom's betrayal, that I had forgotten something important. They weren't responsible for what had happened. They were just kids, innocent in all of this. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to be there for them without losing myself. Claire stayed for a little while longer, and we talked about how I might visit them, slowly, on my own terms. She assured me there was no pressure, no expectations. Just an open door. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope of pictures spread out in front of me. I picked up the letters they had drawn, childish, colorful scribbles that made my heart ache. One of them was from Luke, a simple drawing of a house with 2 figures standing outside. I knew what it was supposed to be. It was me and him, standing on my porch, the way we had that day so many months ago. I wiped away my tears, knowing I had a choice to make. The next weekend, I packed a small bag and drove up to Margaret's house. It wasn't a long drive, but it felt like the longest journey I'd ever made. When I arrived, Margaret greeted me warmly, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face kind and weathered. She didn't say much, just thanked me for coming and pointed me toward the backyard, where Luke and Emma were playing. I walked slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the backyard, I saw them. Luke was playing with a soccer ball, kicking it against a tree, and Emma was sitting on a blanket with her stuffed bear. I stood there for a moment, watching them, my feet rooted to the spot. Then Luke turned and saw me. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he just stared, as if he couldn't believe I was actually there. Then, with a shout, he dropped the ball and ran toward me, his arms wide open. "Auntie Jane," he cried, his voice full of joy. I knelt down just in time to catch him in a hug, and as his small arms wrapped around me, I felt something inside me break, something I hadn't even realized I'd been holding on to. Emma followed, more timidly, but when I held out my arms, she ran to me too, clutching her bear tightly. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of their embrace, I knew I had made the right decision. I wasn't their mother, and I never would be. But I could be something else. I could be there for them, in whatever way they needed. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Over the months that followed, I became a regular part of their lives. I visited them often, taking small steps to build a relationship with them, not as a replacement for their parents, but as someone they could count on. They still called me Auntie Jane, and over time, the title began to feel right. There were challenges, of course. Moments when the grief resurfaced, when the memories of Tom's betrayal still stung. But with every visit, with every laugh and hug from Luke and Emma, the pain lessened. I wasn't healing just for myself, I was healing for them too. In the end, it wasn't about whether I had done the right thing from the beginning. It was about what I chose to do moving forward. And I chose them.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed these Reddit stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.